With this video, I really want to help explain how I pick, the size braided line that I'm going to put on a bait caster and the actual application for that. So a little bit on rod and reel, but really selecting the size braid that you're going to put on a bait caster, given the technique that you're going to fish that on. My braided line selection on bait casters is kind of like it is on spinning rods, to be honest. It's pretty easy, pretty minimal as far as what I carry. I carry 30, 50, and 65. Those are the three sizes of braided line that I use. If I'm fishing a topwater, like a walking style bait, or a wake bait, something that I'm throwing on a 6.5 foot medium action rod, that I'm putting a lot of action into the bait with the rod, that's probably going to be on 30-pound test. I may occasionally go up to 50, but generally that's going to be on 30. I want the thinnest diameter braid that I can have, something I can make a good long cast with, and that thinner diameter of that 30-pound test really allows you to do that. So walking topwater baits, I love fishing those on braid because you can make a good long cast. It's really easy to work the bait. Unlike, if you're using monofilament, a lot of stretch, really hard to work the bait. But 30-pound test is what I use in that situation. For stuff that I'm going to be, I actually do a good amount of fishing with braid with a leader, especially like a Texas rig worm, a soft plastic stick bait, whether I've got a weight on it or not. A lot of those kind of situations, I love to fish braid with a fluorocarbon leader. I like the no stretch of the braid, but I really want to have my bait tied on the fluorocarbon, so I do that a good bit. And I'm most of the time I'm going to have 50-pound test. It's pretty much what I'm going to have on that, because 30 in that situation, I have had issues of actually breaking 30-pound test. Whether that was at the knot or just on the line or whatever. So if I've got on something I'm really setting the hook hard on a bait caster setup, the minimum I'm going to have on that is going to be 50. So 50-pound test works well with a Texas rig, casting a football jig, those type of things. And I'll do that if it's shallow. I'll do that in water that's really deep. But I've caught a ton of fish on that particular setup. That's a Bass Pro Mag Finesse worm, 3/16 ounce weight on a 3/0 heavy duty worm hook. But that is an excellent setup. Shallow water, cover fishing, that type of thing, man. I generate a lot of bites with that particular deal. But 50-pound test braid, usually a 17-pound XPS fluorocarbon leader with the FG knot. That's an excellent setup. Another one that I use 50-pound test braid on is this particular setup here. It's a 7.3 medium heavy action rod, and this is really an all-purpose setup here. I'll fish a frog on this. I've actually got a Carolina rig tied on it for some reason. I don't even remember where I was throwing that at. I hate a Carolina rig, but apparently I had one tied on somewhere. But I'll use a Carolina rig on that same setup, set a frog, swim jig, but this is a 7.3 medium heavy action rod, 7.5 to 1 gear ratio reel, all around workhorse. 50-pound test braid works really well on this. And I'll fish, like a popping frog, walking frog, buzzing frogs, all that kind of stuff I'll fish on this. I'll also throw, a big heavy plop style bait. I'll fish that on this exact same setup too with 50-pound test braid. So that's an all around, if I was going to suggest one setup for braided line application, it would be that 7.3 medium heavy. And then the one that I use 65-pound test on is actually my flipping, punching, kind of setup. 7.6 heavy action rod, and that's gonna be what I'm gonna have 65-pound test Bass Pro Hyper braid on, because I'm flipping that into really heavy cover. Typically that's some type of grass or reeds or something like that. And I may have a 3/4 ounce, I may have 1.5 ounce weight, may have a big jig on there. But that setup where I'm, punching into those mats, that's the only one that I particularly use 65-pound test braid on, because I really like the strength of it to get down into that stuff, to get those fish out. A lot of those other applications, I'm actually casting those. So I like the little bit thinner line for a longer cast. But in this situation, this is close quarters. I'm never making a long cast. These are always just pitching or flipping. And that's why I like that 65-pound test, is for getting those fish out of that heavy cover. So really, sum it up, 3 sizes, 30, 50, 65. if I'm spooling up a bait caster with braid, it's gonna be one of those three. And really, treble hooks, that's the only one that I go with 30-pound test on. Everything else is gonna have at least 50, 65 for my punching setup.